Jim Pfaff of the Conservative Caucus.org. Jim, or .com. Jim, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. I got it mixed up there.
They both work.
We have a big story that's coming out of Minneapolis, of course, nonstop coming out of Minneapolis. I feel like we are going to be talking about Minneapolis every day for the next year, probably.
It sure feels like it.
A group of anti-ICE protesters stormed a church yesterday while they were in service. And here's just a video while we talk. I think you can hear them chanting, doing their chants over the service and disrupting the service. And if you could hear the person in the background, it's none other than Don Lemon.
We're going to play some clips of Don Lemon here. I know that, but let me just make this comment real quick. One of the assertions that Don Lemon makes that everyone will hear is that, hey, First Amendment, people are free speech and these people need to understand, what's going on and blah, blah. Listen, First Amendment doesn't give you the right to go on to a private facility and ransack and overtake a church service or any other meeting.
Yeah.
For no good. That's not free speech. Now, it's not necessarily criminal per se. Some jurisdictions might have some criminal requirements related to such things, but maybe it's not criminal, but don't call it First Amendment speech. This is an intimidation tactic. This is a political intimidation tactic that is exactly the same as what Mao Zedong worked with young college students in China to implement during the Cultural Revolution. The goal there is to shut down opposition and by intimidation, by threats of violence. And that's, I don't care what anyone says. It's totally inappropriate.
Yep. And Don Lemon got a chance, I guess, to talk to the pastor there at the church. And here's that clip of him having an interaction with the pastor.
What do you think of this? I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me though.
We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yes. Okay. That's why we're here. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to
All right, Jim, aren't you impeding on the First Amendment when you enter a private property and stop a church service? Aren't you impeding on their First Amendment?
Essentially what this group of people that ransacked this church, when I say they didn't ransack it, they didn't, break things, but who violated this church service, they're competing First Amendment rights with the church. They're saying that their First Amendment rights are superior to these church members' rights. The reason that they imply that is because they hate Christianity. They're godless. I find it also very interesting. Don Lemon, Shazam! I ended up at this thing that they were doing, and I reported on it. Bullcrap. He was coordinating it. And now let me address the Jesus thing. No, Jesus would not endorse this. Jesus didn't act in this manner that these people did in violating a church service. And Jesus is not on the side of the illegal immigrant issue. I mean, this is one of the great fallacies about this whole debate on immigration, because what is often quoted from Scripture is to take care of the foreigner, verses like this: take care of the foreigner, the sojourner in your land, treat them appropriately. What is misunderstood about every one of those scriptures, which are used wildly taken out of context and twisted, is that what God does demand is that you treat people justly when they're coming through your land. Now, so then, therefore, people are going to say, oh, no. So what you're saying then is that when people come illegally, that they should get full due process rights and all this. No, that's not what's being said. In fact, the people who are coming into this country, that are the ones committing criminal acts should absolutely go to jail. They have all the justice they need. They ought to go through the criminal court system and be immediately removed from the country. But others are taking welfare payments from American welfare systems. They're not citizens. They don't qualify. They never have qualified, even though bills have been passed to try to reassert that. And they're stealing from the American people. The sojourner in the Old Testament, every time you read the Old Testament, you hear about the foreigner in the land. Just remember, the reason those foreigners were in the land at that time, by and large, is because they were nomadic in their approach to moving their flocks, trying to find water. And the justice that God was calling for in Scripture at that time was to not steal their flocks and to harm them in any way so that you could steal them, to not cause theft or harm to their livelihood, because they were moving through the land as sojourners to take care of their flocks and herds. And that's the justice that God's talking about. And I just want to add one other thing here. You read in Old Testament scripture quite often about justice for the poor. Well, what does that mean? What it means is that poor people should not be taken advantage of because of their low position, that they should have the same rights before the law as everybody else, that people who are wealthy or wealthier than them in any way should not be able to abuse them at law. It does not mean that poor people get to do whatever they want, take whatever they want from people, and there is no, there's zero instance of government welfare payments in the Old Testament. When people talk about paying, illegals and paying poor people through government welfare, that just doesn't exist in the Old Testament. So every bit of this debate, and I'm going through all those things, even the ones unrelated to illegals, because this is that entire debate. Democrats and people on the left are about transfer payments to people who very often don't deserve them. Of course, you should take care of the poor, but that was always something that was commanded of individuals, never of governments. It's an entire twisting of Scripture to try to intimidate people into doing something that is a political desire, not a biblical one.
Yep. And to claim you're on Jesus' side while you're protecting pedophiles and sex offenders is another thing. As this clip shows here, this ICE agent looks like, I think he's actually a DHS agent. Looks like he had enough of these people. Watch this clip.
We're here to arrest a child sex offender. And you guys are out here honking.
Oh, they're not. No, we're pressed.
That vehicle right there is honking and impeding our investigations while we're trying to arrest a child sex offender. That's who you guys are protecting. Insane. That's what we're doing.
It is insane. Yeah. It's absolutely insane. Listen, that is what DHS is doing. The numbers are this. Of people detained by DHS under the Trump administration, 70% are criminals. They either have been convicted of a crime or they have committed crimes and are being pursued. 30% are not, and so people will say, well, that's unjust. You can't do anything with those people. Yes, we can. We have laws in this country that say you cannot be here illegally, and it is a felony. It's absolutely absurd what these people are doing. And overall, hundreds of thousands of young women have been sexually abused, have been put into situations where they're being used in a sexual manner and being abused in other ways because of this massive immigration influx that the Joe Biden administration just allowed to happen. The Biden administration violated the law. One of my frustrations with the Trump administration is I'm not seeing people on the scale that it should be happening, being thrown into jail, being convicted of crimes that they committed while in government service, because they did commit crimes. What Donald Trump is doing, he is duty bound to do as president of the United States. What DHS is doing, what he is, through Tom Homan and Kristi Noem, undertaking related to this migrant crisis that we have, is exactly what he's required to do by law. If he were not doing it, he's violating the law by not enforcing it. Joe Biden and his administration did that, and this needs to be corrected. This, for those that went into that church and absconded a church service, this is the Christian moral thing to do. Donald Trump is upholding justice, and these people standing for these illegals, particularly these criminal illegals, they are absconding justice. They're the people who the Bible is condemning when it talks about issues like justice. I mean, Amos is the book of Amos, which is one of the biggest social justice warrior quoted books, is speaking out against the very injustices that these protesters are working against. They are violating justice. They are asking for injustice to be perpetuated upon this land. They are the scoundrels, not that church, not Donald Trump, nor his administration, nor those of us who support these policies.
Yep. And we're going to stay on Minneapolis one more time with your buddy, Nick Sorter. But just to mention, I had clips, but we don't really need to play them. Don Lemon was claiming that he just followed the group there. And then there's video evidence, supposedly from his video, that he was in contact with the group's leadership and knew they were going to the church before they were going. And then he later claims that he just followed them there.
This is just like with CNN going, showing up when Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon are being, and Roger Stone are being arrested, illegally arrested, by the way. And Shazam, they just showed up. It's a total setup. Don Lemon and the Democrat Party in general, leftists in this country, they hate religion. It's not because they're trying to get people to assert religion. They want Christians to twist scripture in a heretical manner, to go along with their political outcomes. They've been working this in churches for years, and many have given in to this leftist propaganda. It's absolutely insane and absurd, and it has to be called out for what it is. It is a violation of justice. It's a violation of individual rights. This church should not be invaded in this manner. There probably was a law broken. I don't know that there was one. But in terms of issues of justice and propriety, it is absolutely inappropriate what happened. It's particularly inappropriate that Don Lemon is behind it. He is a Maoist communist. That's essentially, he's using Maoist communist tactics. That's essentially what was happening there.
Yep. Well, we got to go to break, but when we come back, we have a story about Nick Sorter, your friend down there in Minneapolis. And on that note of, maybe there was something illegal happening there, Alina Habba has gone on Fox this morning and said that they are going to be investigated. There will be investigation of the storming of a Minnesota church and violating the FACE Act. So we'll see how what comes of that. But we have to go to break. We'll be right back in just a moment.
We have a big announcement, folks. It's called Bella Melt. In the first week, you lost 3 pounds on this, right?
That is correct.
Your GLP-1 is a natural hormone that's in every single one of our bodies. And your GLP-1 lets you know if you're full. It's a satiety hormone. So when your GLP is working properly, it does help suppress your appetite as well as reduce those cravings. So what it's going to do best is it's going to reduce your sugar cravings or any other cravings you have in your body. It's going to suppress that appetite. But where Melissa got the most benefit, I think, over the last week was the L-carnitine. The L-carnitine tells your mitochondria, this is where we talked about it before, this is where you produce energy in your cells. It actually tells those mitochondria to burn fat for fuel.
Melissa House BG.com. Just now introducing for the first time Bella Melt with GLP-1 fast action.
All right, welcome back from the break. All right, Jim, your friend Nick Sorter was in Minneapolis yesterday, and I guess he was just filming out of his car, and a Somali woman took his camera and ran off with it. Let's watch this.
Hey, get. What did she just do?
Oh, shit. Okay, it's okay.
She took Nick's camera. She just stole Nick's camera. Let's get her.
No, give him the camera!
Just tell her to give him the camera back.
Where's the police here?
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
illegally driving that car.
What happened, Nick?
They just stole my camera.
Right out of your hand while you're in the car?
That's what you wanted, right? You wanted, right? That's what you did. Man, listen, mother. Get out of here.
My daughter.
Coward.
Mom,
You a coward.
you have to leave.
All right, and to your point, where the police, he later, I guess they called the police to file a police report on this lady, and the police officer tells him that he shouldn't be there. Here, let's watch just a few minutes of this.
We have a ton of calls stacked that we have to answer.
So, I mean,
I don't have a time frame for you, but my point is, you guys need to not be in this area. I mean, I can't tell you have to leave, but if we're getting calls that you guys are harassing people,
we were.
but driving around is not
harassing. We were the ones being harassed.
And 100%, that's fine. I'm just saying if it rises to that level, because they're saying you guys are.
Well, that's the other thing about us too. Is like we're journalists. Like people are trying to intimidate us out of here for doing our first amendment.
I know, but we don't need this stuff to keep happening.
I get it.
The level of hostility, obviously, it's not going to go away.
We just want our stuff. Like, I mean, it's.
Understand, and we're going to work on that. We've got a very detailed report started here.
And also, here's other thing.
All right, so they said they got a report and they're working on it, but they shouldn't be there. Really? A journalist being downtown, you're going to blame them?
Let's talk about First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
Like, he's causing no harm to anyone. He's just filming a protest that's happening. By the way, they're all masked up. But no. These DHS agents, they can't be masked.
Yeah.
I mean, the absurdity and the hypocrisy of these efforts is evident. The American people do see this. I'm really curious, by the time we get to November of this year, how voters are going to react to this. Because the obvious fraud and waste and abuse and the violent nature of these people who are protesting is evident to everyone. There's no Republican protests. By the way, recently you've had a reemergence of a discussion about the assault, or actually the arson, on Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's home that happened. And they're saying, yeah, we just got violence everywhere. You know, this is a real problem, and we all have to come together and we have to deal with this. No, we have to come together and recognize that the Democrat Party will utilize violence. They will utilize unjust courts and everything else that they can do to bypass the normal system of our electoral process and of the basic construct of our government to get their way. This is not the American ideal. It's why I say perpetually, the Democrat Party is not an American party. It is not in any shape, form, or fashion. This is not John F. Kennedy's Democrat Party. Far from it. This is radical leftist, communist, socialist organization that is working hard to overthrow the American government, to overthrow our Constitution and our whole constitutional order. They have been bypassing the constitutional order for years with the help of unjust judges. That's what's happening here. And they're using violence on the streets to assert those priorities. It is not an American party. These are not people that uphold the American ideal in any way. If you could just, if we got rid of all these problems, the violence, the misuse of courts, and we went right to the electoral system, by and large, Democrats would not be winning regularly. This is why there are no elections in California. Why? Because Democrats want to control the whole system. There literally are not elections. They're jungle primaries. The fact that people can gather ballots in an unlimited fashion, that you have no validation at all, no substantive validation, that the gathering of those ballots is not coordinated in some fashion to throw their elections. We have an injustice problem. God talks about this in the Old Testament. Everyone should read Isaiah chapter 3. The injustice that is described there, you might as well just be talking about everything the Democrat Party does today. This is something that we have to be ready to take on, because if we don't do it successfully, we will lose it all. Donald Trump is a reprieve. At present, Donald Trump's administration is not a reversal of the problems that have existed in this century, beginning with the Biden administration, actually beginning with the Bush administration and the Patriot Act. It's not a reversal of all that. It is a reprieve from that. We have to institutionally change the situation that we're in, or else we will go right back to where we were the previous 4 years and worse.
Yep, and another interesting fact about this individual who stole Nick's camera is the address that came back to her from her license plate is a children's autism center. So it's just interesting, right?
So she's paid to do this.
Yeah.
Got it. With our tax dollars, with federal and state tax dollars, she's getting paid to act in a violent, criminal manner. She not only stole property, she drove that vehicle on the sidewalk. Those are two criminal acts right there.
Yep.
And the police is doing nothing about it. It is just breathtaking.
Well, in other news out of the UK, Enoch Burke, we've talked about him before. He's a school teacher who refused to comply with I guess he had a transgender student who wanted him to call him by opposite pronouns. And he said, no, I'm not going to do it. And he's been arrested for this. And I believe he's gone on trial already, right? He's had multiple court hearings.
He's had 560 days in jail.
Yeah.
And there have been multiple instances where he's had to face the legal injustice system that has developed in the UK related to speech and the destruction of the basic rights and liberties that we know and stated from the to us by our Creator. And they are, Keir Starmer and his administration are entirely undermining every principle of justice and righteousness that has ever brought freedom in the West. And the West is the only place where human beings have had the kind of liberties and freedoms that have been substantive and useful, and that helped grow economies and bring people out of poverty. You know, it is the rule of law that has allowed rank, horrible, grinding poverty to go away substantially around the world. The amount of people in that sort of a situation today compared to even 100 years ago is profound. It has been a profoundly positive thing what the United States has done and what Europe once did. Europe is falling. It is, and Donald Trump's pushback against Europe is entirely appropriate because they are undermining every rational principle of liberty that has sustained the West and blessed the entire world for 2 centuries now.
Yep, and I guess Enoch was just released last week, and here he is just today.
Using his pronouns, that's what he's doing. Refuse to use the they pronoun for a young child. Nobody wants it. Step into the back of the car, please. Nobody wants it. It's an abuse of power. Absolute insanity. Absolute insanity what's happening here at Wilson's Hospital every School. Boy and girl and man and woman, forcing transgenderism on them. Nobody accepts this. They don't believe it. People don't want to be told what to believe in. Well, this is all about transgenderism. Yeah, it's about forcing No, it is about one issue. This is about the issue of the court order. It's been brought before the court. Judge Brian Krieger knew what would happen. He knew what would happen today.
This is insanity.
And it's abuse of power. It is abuse of power. You're working forcing with transgenders the High Court. It's illegal. Every school in the country, workplaces, businesses, and he's abusing his power. All because you will not accept transgenderism. Abusing his power. Abusing his power. That's what he's doing. Refuse to use the they pronoun for a young child. Nobody wants it. Step into the back of the car, Nobody wants it. It's an abuse of power. Absolute insanity. Absolute insanity. What's happening here?
That's I'm going to tell you, we will have this in the United States if a Democrat becomes president in 2028. We will get very close to it if Democrats take the House this November. The insanity that we thankfully came out of because of Donald Trump's courage as a man and as president and everything that he went through and everything that all the rest of us have gone through, Donald Trump is right to say they're not just attacking him. They were attacking us as well. What you are seeing on the video right there is coming to the United States if we don't radically transform our justice system to become a system of justice again. This is where we're headed, folks. You better be aware of it. You better take it seriously all throughout the year because we've got to show up at the polls and push back against this. And I'm sorry to tell you that to do that, you need to support Republicans because, to be candid, the Republican Party is a weak party overall. There are some great leaders in the Republican Party who we can count on, but not enough. And look at what's happening in Congress right now. They can't even pass the SAVE Act. They won't even do a vote on it in the Senate. It was passed out of the House in this Congress, and the Senate's done nothing with it. And they should get every senator on record about whether they believe that our elections should be just elections that are founded upon citizens only voting. And reducing the excesses of our current electoral system with unsolicited mail ballots, multiple day elections. This has to be fixed because we will not have justice without it. The Democrats' argument is, oh, no, it gives people that have been disenfranchised the opportunity to vote. No, everyone has always had an opportunity to vote in this nation. That has never been a serious problem, except for what was happening right after the Civil War and abuses of black people at that time. That was fixed through just court decisions and by federal laws that restricted things like a poll tax and intimidation at the polls. I mean, we did deal with that, and we had it nearly entirely fixed by, the early in the 20th century. We have got to change this current situation because it is an outrage. It is insurrectionist what Democrats do, and that needs to be addressed legally and otherwise.
Yep, and like you said, if we lose the next election, then we're going to end up like the UK. And if we can't pass some of these bills to enforce actual elections and have fair elections, then we're going to lose the next election. So they have to take it seriously.
And if America falls, the world falls.
Yep.
China's methodology will be what we live under moving forward if we fall as a country, the way the UK is falling right now.
We're all out of time for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Jim, enjoy Indiana football tonight. Until then, take care.
Tonight on the Worldview Report, anti-ICE agitators storm a Christian worship service in Minneapolis, triggering outrage and calls for action. Reports are that the Pentagon has put 1,500 Arctic trained troops on standby for possible deployment to Minnesota amid continuing unrest. There are reports that socialists are preparing to replicate Minneapolis-style chaos to combat ICE sweeps in New York City. And Israel 365 News reports that President Trump has unveiled a Gaza oversight board as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fires back. And Breitbart reports that more than 1 million Chinese nationals with U.S. citizenship could vote in the 2030 elections. Front Page Mag reports tonight that a man named Jihad murdered 3 tourists in Florida. And then in our commentary, Robert Spencer reports on the domestic shockwaves from Trump's actions on Iran and says Iran's supreme leader is talking like a man who just won a war. All this and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. We begin tonight with the developing story out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, where anti-ICE activists disrupted a Christian worship service on Sunday. This is leading to a growing call from coast to coast for federal action. We begin with 2 reports from WorldNet Daily that describe this as an escalation of anti-ICE agitators storming this Christian worship service, followed by pressure on the White House and the Attorney General to respond forcefully. WorldNet Daily reports that demonstrators entered a worship service and disrupted the gathering. That was during, as I said, their church service. They were confronting, supposedly, the issue of immigration enforcement. The headline describes the incident as unacceptable, and we agree. And they framed it as part of a rising campaign against federal agents that is no longer confined to protest outside government buildings. Instead, the conflict is now spilling into private institutions on private property, including houses of worship. Additional reporting from the New York Post identifies the church as City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota, and says the mob targeted the pastor, David Eastwood, accusing him of ties to ICE. The Post says the protesters were linked to the Racial Justice Network and that the lead pastor condemned the disruption. The Post reports that the Department of Justice is looking into whether the incident violated federal civil rights laws tied to religious freedom protections. And the Department of Homeland Security reposted videos of the disruption. WorldNet Daily's second report builds on this incident by stating that the White House and the Attorney General are being urged to come down hard, meaning enforce laws against obstruction, intimidation, or harassment related to federal enforcement operations and public disorder. This comes amid growing national tension surrounding immigration enforcement, protest movements, and so-called ICE Watch organizations that have been documented as having actions in multiple major cities. The National Desk has reported that immigration crackdowns have spurred expanding networks of ICE watchers, as they're called, with some tracking federal activity online and attempting to rapidly mobilize responses. At the federal level, Attorney General Pam Bondi previously issued a memo focusing on what the Department of Justice called, quote, political violence against ICE, end quote, and cited a major surge in attacks on ICE officers compared to the prior year. Now, the story remains centered on one key reality. The immigration enforcement conflict is no longer staying on the streets outside government facilities. It is now crossing into private property, private institutions, including churches, that, of course, is raising serious legal and civic questions about protest boundaries, religious freedom, and the federal government's response. Staying in Minnesota, where national attention remains fixed on unrest connected to federal immigration enforcement activity. Zero Hedge reports that the Pentagon has put some 1,500 Arctic-trained troops on standby for possible deployment to Minnesota. The report frames the move as an escalation in federal preparedness amid ongoing unrest and disorder. This development, well, it matches reporting from the Associated Press which states that the Pentagon ordered approximately 1,500 soldiers from the Army's 11th Airborne Division, which is based in Alaska, to be placed on standby with prepare to deploy orders. The AP reports that troops were put on standby amid large-scale enforcement operations and protest, with the possibility that President Trump could invoke the Insurrection Act. That is a law that permits the president to use active duty troops in a domestic law enforcement role. This has been used many times by several presidents. You might remember when it was used by President George H. Bush during the LA riots. The last time the Insurrection Act was invoked at this level, as I said, was during the unrest in Los Angeles in 1992. While deployment is not confirmed, standing orders place troops ready for movement if needed. And that readiness itself, it's a message that Washington, D.C. is preparing for worst-case scenarios in Minnesota, particularly as the governor of Minnesota and the mayor of Minneapolis, according to many, are fanning the flames of the protesters in the streets. Breitbart News reports tonight that activist networks are working to expand Minneapolis-style protests into other major American cities. According to Breitbart Immigration, the report claims that socialists are planning to replicate Minneapolis chaos as a tactic to combat ICE sweeps in New York City. Breitbart frames the development as an organized effort rather than spontaneous protest. The report suggests that political groups are preparing coordinated actions aimed at disrupting federal immigration operations, building resistance networks, and creating rapid response systems that mobilize crowds when ICE activity is detected. The significance here is strategy. Rather than protesting policy, these groups, they are reportedly seeking to interfere with law enforcement itself, potentially increasing the likelihood of confrontation with federal agents in high-density areas. Breitbart also ties this to the national conversation about so-called ICE watch-style movements. That's where activists monitor enforcement and attempt, if they can, to pressure agents or to obstruct operations through mass presence. New York City is a key location for such tactics due to population density, as well as sanctuary policy disputes and deep infrastructure or activists that are organizing. If Minneapolis becomes a template, as Breitbart claims, the result could be an expansion of immigration enforcement conflict from one city into a national wave. Now we turn to a story that's gaining traction across conservative media and online political circles. Revolver News published a report titled, "Mike Benz Reminds MAGA Who the Real Enemy Is, and It's Our Fault." That's the name of the article. The piece centers on public remarks from Mike Benz, who is the former State Department official and current executive director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. He has become known for documenting what he calls the modern censorship and information control apparatus, operating through a mix of government influence, non-government organizations, and tech enforcement networks. In the Revolver report, Ben's core message is not focused on a single politician or election result. It's a warning about how the power structure operates. Benz, he argues that many Americans have aimed their anger at surface-level political enemies, while the deeper machinery that shapes institutions, media narratives, and internet control continues functioning, regardless of who wins a given election. The Revolver article frames this as Benz urging conservatives to recognize that activism and public outrage alone is not enough if the larger infrastructure of cultural enforcement and state and private coordination remains intact. Benz is known for speaking about speech governance. Those are model systems where governments may not ban speech directly through the law, but they can pressure private platforms, corporations, banks, payment processors, and major internet infrastructure providers to throttle or even remove targeted voices. That point, of course, connects with the Benz message that is broader. that modern conflict is not only fought with weapons and armies, it's fought through enforcement of information systems, funding pipelines, and control of public visibility. Benz, he has emphasized in other appearances that free speech, well, it's under great assault, and this battle is far from over. In a Real Clear Politics video clip, he said the following, quote, "The free speech fight is just getting started," end quote. Revolver's report uses Ben's frustration to underline what it sees as a pattern. Conservatives, they often react to outcomes without dismantling the mechanisms that produced them in the first place. And by saying it's our fault, Mike Benz, he's saying that the public allowed institutions to grow too powerful, too unaccountable, and too insulated from oversight. The tone of the Revolver article is blunt because really the stakes, they're that high. Benz argues that the U.S. is facing a form of internal capture, not necessarily by one party, but by interconnected networks that exist across administration changes. Regardless of whether viewers agree with Mike Benz's conclusions, the reason this story is spreading is simple. Many Americans feel like elections do not fully change national direction. And Benz, well, he's offering a theory for why this happens. We'll be right back after this short break. What if millions around the world could access Bible teaching and worldview training for free right now without hitting a paywall? That's exactly what happens every day at worldviewtube.com because of the Worldview Weekend Foundation. We don't lock our live stream behind PayPal. We don't restrict our content to members only. Instead, the Worldview Weekend Foundation helps cover the cost of delivering free educational and ministry programming to people across the nation and around the world. And it's not just programming. My Sunday night church service, where I taught verse by verse through Revelation for 18 months, and now I am teaching through the book of Daniel, is made possible through the support of our church, Worldview Weekend Foundation. If you believe this kind of truth-centered biblical teaching must continue, donate today. Go now to worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address and phone number there if you'd rather give by phone or mail. That's worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you. Welcome back from the break. Thanks for being with us tonight. And as I always say, thank you for helping us keep this broadcast going free of charge. We could put the entire program, our live stream, our reposts, all of that could go behind a paywall. But our foundation comes in and helps underwrite some of the costs to push it out free for educational and ministry purposes, to help people understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview. Our foundation is also our church, and we hold our Sunday night church service each and every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, at worldviewtube.com. Last night, I continued Lesson 2 as I'm teaching through the book of Daniel. Hope you'll join us each and every Sunday night for that church service, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern at worldviewtube.com. If you miss it, you'll find it on demand on Monday mornings there at worldviewtube.com. Just one of the many ministry projects of our foundation, including our upcoming National Worldview Weekend. What's it be, our 22nd or 23rd Worldview Weekend? This year, we're making it absolutely free of charge. We've never done that. We've never had our national conference be free. Renting the building alone is going to cost us over $10,000 for the Friday night and Saturday. But our foundation is stepping in to help us push out this conference so that people can attend for free and gain training in understanding the times and how God would have us to respond. So again, if you appreciate all the great broadcast services and ministries we do here, please support us through our foundation, would you? Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Very soon we'll let you know how you can sign up free of charge for our national conference. But please go ahead and mark your calendar now for Friday night, October 23rd, Saturday, October 24th. Soon, we'll make it where you can register free of charge and save your spot. It'll be free, but you will need to register to make sure we have enough seats for all those who want to attend. Recently, we were in Milwaukee back in April of last year. We had over 1,000 people in attendance, standing room only. So again, we're looking forward to a full house. Brought to you in part by our foundation, worldviewfoundation.com. So thank you for your support. Now at worldviewfoundation.com. Well, now to the Middle East, where a major post-war governance proposal for Gaza is generating imminent friction between Washington and Jerusalem. According to Israel 365 News, President Trump has unveiled a new Gaza oversight plan, which includes the creation of an international body to supervise Gaza's transition, its restructuring, and administration. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing back. The proposal is being described across multiple outlets as a multi-year plan that includes a governing board and a more hands-on executive mechanism. A key issue in Netanyahu's pushback is the structure of what's being called the Board of Peace, and more importantly, the executive committee beneath it that would have direct involvement in Gaza's post-war management. Times of Israel reports that Netanyahu's office issued a rare public statement saying the executive committee's makeup, quote, was not coordinated with Israel and contradicts its policy, end quote. So just why is Netanyahu pushing back? Well, perhaps for very good reason. You see, multiple reports indicate the proposed executive committee includes senior officials from Turkey and Qatar, two countries that